So one of the things we talk about in class, and one of the things we consider both as art students and photography students, textile students, and it's a bit of a revelation, I think, sometimes for students and for us as well, is that everything in the world is designed. Everything in the world is designed by somebody, conceived by somebody, and ultimately, in terms of your work, I suppose, it's then marketed. So having been designed by this person and that person, somebody then sets about understanding that product and marketing that product in a creative way. And that's really what I'm hoping to get out of this session, if that's all right, is to allow our students to understand how that works and perhaps see how they find their way into that world.
You're spot on there. I think we're problem solvers, aren't we? So I think everything in the world is a problem solving, really. You know? Yeah. So I think just in varying degrees of categories, and like you said, product design all the way to advertising design or consumer design. Yeah. So
just rewind for a minute, which is I think difficult for all of us. The older we get, is it possible for you to go back to how you might have viewed your future career when you were sat in a classroom at 14, 15-year-old? You were probably did graphic design, did you, and art? Did you see a route into the world, the creative industries at that point?
Yeah, so it's probably, when I was at school, it was probably, I was more really into art. I think my parents could see that I enjoyed that subject. It was always something that, without me knowing, the passion was coming out of me in that subject. And then I kind of was quite lucky and fortunate to kind of know what I wanted to do at that, probably age 14, 15, I wanted to be a graphic designer. And I think partly due to my dad was in the print trade, so there was a slight link there. Obviously the more technical side of it, but there was a slight link. And then I kind of went to work experience when I was probably about 15 in a design agency. And it wasn't really the design, it was more the attitude of the people that I was working with, and the idea of not wearing a name badge originally was that was another step towards it ingraining in my brain that I want to be in the creative industry. And people were just wearing what they want and kind of seemingly doing what they wanted, which is kind of quite nice at the same time. So that sort of cemented it. And I also had this, I was also very technical. At the time, it was kind of the digital revolution was going to happen. Computers and PCs had just started becoming mainstream into people's homes. So I had a keen interest in websites and in graphics, as in what we know it now, graphic design, which is like computer, obviously back before it wasn't computer based. But so I was already seeding that. I think I coded a website when I was about 14, 15. And so there was something in the process of making something that was going on in my brain quite clearly. So that yes, I did know, but I think that the red herring there is a lot of people don't know what they want to do. And I think that's important. That's really important, because I think that this industry is open to all sorts of stuff. You know, you might end up doing a graphic design course and end up being a filmmaker. You just don't know yet that that's where you're headed towards that kind of subject. And I think that's the beauty of the industry, is there's so many avenues.
So you had a sort of general direction of travel in terms of creativity, but no real specifics by the sound of it in that.
No, nothing. I didn't really know I suppose I didn't really know what a graphic designer was, I suppose.
No.
I just knew that at the time I just thought I was making posters, you know.
Yeah.
There's obviously then another layer to that of why are you making this poster? Who are you making this poster for? What are you trying to do? And then going to university with a kind of course, a visual communication course that opens it all up to you. So I'm not only want to be a graphic designer, I'm hanging out with illustrators or people who want to be illustrators, or hanging out with photographers or people who want. So you end up inherently getting that mindset and also that knowledge from these people, and walking in on different subjects and seeing what other people are doing. So I think I mentioned it in my bio, but I kind of fell out of love with graphic design and stumbled into an advertising course, which made me realize I just love problem solving. It wasn't actually the technical aspect of actually doing a piece of graphic design. I kind of realized I was just doing that for grades and marks, and that's not kind of what you should do. You know,
No.
you should never do anything for grades and marks, which is kind of an odd thing to say when people are at school, but
Not at all.
it kind of makes sense. And then I suppose like that kind of made sense with, I can draw, but I'm not an artist. I'm not someone who's going to get A stars in art from a technical perspective. But I perhaps maybe would get A stars for thinking. I don't know, you know, or sometimes D's for thinking, because that's, you know, my brain doesn't always work. But that's kind of the key, really. Is it? I think the creative industry. I think when you think about being creative or think about going down an industry, everyone thinks of a very physical, technical thing. They're thinking of a sign writer, or they're thinking of someone who can draw or make or sculpt. And I don't think that necessarily part of the, you know, the whole makeup of the job. It's kind of one small element of the industry. The industry is full of thinkers. That's what it's all about.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So there's obviously all the stuff that you've experienced between walking out the school gates and then ending up where you are now, which perhaps we can unpack a little bit. So what's a day in an advertising art director's world look like, from the start of a project to the end of a project? What's that look like in terms of what you'd experience in your working day?
Yeah, so I think I touched on it at the start, is that it's all about problem solving. I think the day is full of problem solving, and that could be kind of a strategy way into something, which, for instance, how do we sell these trainers to people 20 to 30 years old? You know, how do we there's loads of trainers on the market. What makes these ones special? What's the unique selling proposition, what they call a USP in the short term? But that USPs are becoming more and more rare these days as well, because kind of the world's changing and the world's now full of the same kind of things. Manufacturing is easier. So there's you know, example of trainers, there's a bunch of trainers. How are you going to make these trainers stand out? Yeah. It may not be a USP. You might not have a USP. You've got to create one. So you've got to give the brand a USP. So that's kind of what my day consists of in a general kind of problem solving day. Could be a strategy, could be a design problem, could be that I'm overseeing a designer, a graphic designer or an illustrator, and overseeing what they're doing on the day. They're sending me through their ideas or thoughts or the work they're working on. I'm feeding back to them. I'm in control of the project from an art point of view. Yeah. But I'm always problem solving. So there might be, you know, why is the font that big? Well, it doesn't look quite right. The font that doesn't feel very warm. It feels quite cold. You know, this training is all about warmth and about family, as an bad example. But yeah, the whole day is consistent of problem solving. And then when I say problem solving from what I do, what would be probably a creative brief, which is, what product am I selling? There'll be a bit of strategy on there. So you work with a strategist who's come up with the strategy, as I said earlier, about who are we selling to, why are we selling it, what's the target market. That'll all be on a page. We'll just get a simple line, what we call the trigger. Some people call it other things. Some people call it a zag or things like that. And that trigger will be something that's interesting that someone's found along the way of that product or of the world in general, or culture that we could play off. And that will be this jumping off point. So we'll go away and, you know, you'll have days where your brain's not really getting the right answer, but you're putting it all on the wall. You're slowly making your way through the process. Sometimes you have to do it faster than other times, depending on the time constraint, but it's all about problem solving. How are we solving this problem? And I think the good thing to say is there's never really a wrong answer in advertising. There's just a lot of yes, good answers, but some of them are better than others. It's not.
That's brilliant. I love that concept, because that's something that's absolutely inherent. And I think Emily probably agree with me. That's actually inherent to the way we teach, and it's a conflict between our subject and some of the other subjects that you might come across when you're in school. that are about knowledge acquisition. And here's the answers, learn these answers, regurgitate these answers in an exam. And of course, what we're always trying to encourage our students to do is perish the thought, think for themselves. And it sounds like, those are the students that would belong in the advertising and marketing industry.
Yeah, I think what's good about what we do is we're also able to get a bit of our personality in across projects. So if I was into space, for every brief I have, they may end up with a script about space somewhere because I'm into space. It just happened to fall out of me because that's what I'm into. Same for example, if you've got an idea that you've been passed through a client and the client likes it, now you've got to go and shoot these shoes. You've got to go and shoot the shoes that you're selling. I might really be into Rankin's work, so I might want to get a quote from Rankin to go and work with him. So that's my personal preference because I want to work with him. It's not I'm telling the client that we should use Rankin because of X, Y, and Z, but I'm also using it for my own personal gain. And I think that's probably you get a lot of kind of good feeling out of that because you feel like you're making contribution to your own brain, to your own to your own passions. I think that's probably the interesting bit, is if you can find a job that fuels your passion. I think that's the key, really. It could be anything,
I loved what you did. I think I read it in your bio, but certainly when I was looking at BBH, because you worked at BBH, didn't you, before Chrome? There's a lovely phrase about when the whole world is zigging, you should zag, which actually sums up beautifully this idea of creativity and going against the grain sometimes. And that's very much what we encourage our students to do. If for example, and they'll all be faced by this at various times over the next couple of years, when they're set a brief, when they're set a problem, in terms of a creative response, what would be the first thing you would do if you were at a problem for the first time and a brief? So what's the first thing you do?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of got their own process, and it's quite different. I'll normally kind of look around and either do I agree with what's being said to me? Do we agree with the strategy? Because you should sort of shout up now if you don't agree with the strategy. Have an opinion, have an opinion on what you're doing, and then B, it would be kind of go out and almost be what they call, it's not quite the right word, but visual sponge, where you're just absorbing, living that product, living that problem. It might be a chocolate bar you're doing, so go and buy one of the chocolate bars, start eating it. That's a good start, isn't it? That's probably a good start if you're doing a chocolate. You can't do that with everything, obviously, but you can do that with quite a lot of things. And then I guess you kind of going through the process, trust the process is probably what I try to. I think, like you mentioned, when the world zigzag, is kind of it's believing in finding that zag, finding that thing that makes you go, oh, that's interesting, or suddenly you don't know what you're going to do with it yet, but you've got it on the wall. You've got this idea on the wall that, for example, people when people wear Nike trainers, they only think about jumping. That's an interesting. Straight away, you're in a territory about jumping. It leads you anywhere. You could end up making a game that's all about jumping, or you could end up doing a billboard that's like the Isaac Newton one with Michael Jordan. I think that's an old classic one. That's Jordan 1, Newton 0. For example. So that obviously that's about basketball, but that's kind of what I would say is just the head against the wall idea, where you get stuck. It's going to happen. There's no way of avoiding it.
Right.
And also second questioning and doubting yourself is going to happen. There's no way of avoiding it. But having confidence and conviction in your opinion and your solution to that, then after you've taken stock to it. I'll normally take a solution, a brief, and then decipher it down to a couple of points, make some interesting observations, put them on the wall, then put ideas underneath them observations. Could be this, could be that. And I'll generally sleep on it. I think sleeping on it's a cliche, but or you're going in the shower is you're trying to get your brain into that restful state. Stop stressing about it, because you can stress about things, and I think it kind of clouds your creativity. But yeah, the biggest thing is the process. Even if how far you get down, even if you're 2 days before the deadline, you may have skipped a couple of steps, and then you've got to really take stock and go back again and believe in the process, your process that will be unique to you potentially.
Okay.
You've got to just believe in that process, and that's how I get there, because not everybody gets there the same way. Some people might draw. I'm a late night kind of person,
right?
Where I could work all day, and then I'll come home and then want to just pick my laptop up and let the thoughts come out.
You never stop, really. As a creative person, your brain's always on. You're always doing it.
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think for some, because this is a horror, but they're naturally talented like that, and some people have to really try hard. And for some people, it annoys me, like my brain, that I haven't cracked it. I've got this niggle in the back of my brain that's just I'm not happy with what I've got, or you're constantly trying to find something better. You know, like they say, perfection doesn't exist, because it doesn't exist, but you're trying to get there. That's kind of, in your brain, you're trying to make it there. You'll always never perfect it, but if you can have that hunger, that hunger and the desire to, and it could be anything. This is not advertising. This could be absolutely anything you've got to crack. As I said, problem solving is again the key word there, because it's just what it is. It just happened to be in advertising. That's
really interesting, because that's very similar to what Rankin said to us in one of our previous goes about what's your favorite photograph. Well, he said it's my next one. So it's I'm never happy. I'm never satisfied. I'm always trying to improve. I'm just going to go briefly, that's all right, Mark, to some of the questions that have come in on the chat. Anna's asked, how long does the process of clients agreeing with your vision take? Is it common for them to decline ideas for a few times before they agree with one? And if I can link that perhaps to Emily's question about what is it about that role of developing a project that excites you the most?
Yeah, I think you all know what I'm going to say here, is that they never really ever like the first idea. There'd be several, that it does happen. Obviously, it does happen, but sometimes the process is driven by timings. So, for example, I keep going back to a trainer because it's just an easy example. But say that trainer's coming out in April. What are we going to do? We've got to get something out in April. So sometimes it's driven by time pressures, and sometimes it's just driven by no one liking the thoughts yet, or not liking the ideas. So, and you'll normally find that the more you can normally have an idea that you're so wedded to, that you absolutely think is completely brilliant, that you convince them. You work so hard to convince them, and they still keep rejecting it. And then you'll take stock, and it'll all been worth it, because you'll realize that the reason why they're rejecting it, there was probably a reason. It's not normally because they just don't like you or your thoughts. There's normally a real reason behind it, and as you go through that process, as I was saying earlier about trusting the process, even that is trusting the rejection process, trust the rejects as well, because you've probably taken all of them things from the rejects, and they're all in your mind somewhere. They're all bubbling away. So all of that's worth it. And I think it's Silverstein and Goodman said it's an industry of rejection. I think that's probably the best way to describe advertising. And what was the second question? There was another one, wasn't there? There was Emily. Well, Emily's asked another question since. What excites you most about your role, and also how important are the sort of working relationships within the development of an idea? So what excites me most is probably, this is probably the cliche again, but every day is different. Genuinely, you're making it different as well. You're having fun while you're doing it. That's brilliant. I think I've mentioned to you, Stuart, before that I always have this thing about, if I feel like I'm at work more than 2 days a week, then I should quit the job. I should change, go to a different agency, because I'm clearly not enjoying myself as much as I should do. So that's probably like the bit that excites me. But there's then also, I think, the amount of people that you get to work with. I think that's been touched on before, but photographers, illustrators, stylists, they've all got stories. They've all, from all the electrician guys on the shoot, they've all got stories. They've all been on tour with Kiss, or they've all got really crazy stories. It's just full of really interesting people that you just get along with for 2-3 days and have a blast.
Yeah.
So that's always exciting. I think obviously seeing your work actually come to fruition is very fulfilling for a couple of days until you're back on the horse again. I think that kind of like what you mentioned earlier, that you're never kind of satisfied. And I think they always say that advertisers they only have a kind of awards night is kind of a final day to actually sit back and have a moment where you actually kind of celebrate what you do, because otherwise your brain's going off to solve something else, So
I've got another question. Hermione, what's the best creative criticism, what's the best constructive criticism you've ever received?
This one's easy for me. Okay. No one's going to die. Basically, we're not surgeons. We're not putting our lives on the line every day. You've not solved something. Move on. Keep trying to solve it. The client meeting will go badly tomorrow. Just deal with it. It's something that's stuck with me for the whole. Whenever I'm really serious, completely stressed, or get criticised, and you're feeling like you're taking it hard, I just think of that and just go, I'm not a surgeon. I'm not. Someone's life doesn't depend on these trainers selling. Someone's job might do, but someone's life doesn't. That's the most important thing. But it just makes you have a reflection. And even now in these times where sort of COVID hit, it's given us even more reflection as an industry to understand that actually what we do is kind of not irrelevant, but it's kind of in the grand scheme of things. We're having fun, really. That's what we're here to do, guys, right? It's not so serious. It's not so serious anymore. I think the advertising went a bit serious for a bit. I think it's probably on the way back to being a bit more fun, which is good news for everybody, really.
Absolutely, I love that. Thank you. That's my new most important piece of advice. I'll put that up somewhere.
Well, my story of that was I was a young creative when that. Well, I was in the first year of my career, and it was just a very stressful brief, and we just had, I don't know, 6 to 7 reviews with creative director, and it just was not going well. It was just, everything was just no. And we were there at like 11 o'clock at night, and one of the other creative directors just came up to us and just said no one's going to do it. And it was just like, I think we even got the idea the next morning.
That's fantastic.
It's just something that settles your brain. You just need something to just make you go. When I mean it's not important, I think it is let your brain not think it's important. It's probably the better way of describing it, because then your brain's trying too hard to try and solve this problem. That the answer's there somewhere. It's just getting it out.
Is there a favourite piece of work that you've done since you got that piece of advice? Something where that it really illustrates that clarity and that ability to think outside the box.
Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, I suppose. Is there a piece of work that does that?
Like a campaign, or it's something you've been involved in.
Yeah.
Where you
actually, it's probably an Audi campaign that I did for the Audi A1 way back, and the story of that is that had been around the agency for a long time, and had hit a lot of creative teams. So it's quite a good example of not getting stressed about it, and persistence, and having that mindset of that you will crack it, you will eventually get there. And we came up with an idea that was quite nice in the end, that just hit the brief. It's just one of them. It was quite a difficult brief, and you felt like you'd had every iteration of that answer. But obviously there's endless answers. But yeah, that's a good articulation of never giving up, I suppose. I think that's what people say about me. That's kind of that constant desire to fight. I think that's probably not just me. That's probably everybody that's in a creative team, in particular. That it's just that constant desire to solve the problem in front of you. And it may even be a small thing. It doesn't have to be a big thing in lights. That we're not talking about that. It's, you know, you've ended up getting 10 million YouTube views, or you know, it's all over in lights on campaign. It's not about that. It's about that. It's just something that fulfills you as well. So it's not necessarily something that was awarded, or, you know. Yeah. I think Rankin touched on that before about just shoot. Sometimes you just need to go and shoot some normal stuff and not, you know. It's them day-to-day bits that can be very fulfilling as well, I think. Yeah.
So whilst you're in advice mode, so we've got with us 15 of our year 12 photographers, and you know, no doubt quite a lot of our creative students will watch this at a later date. If what you've said so far has sort of lit a fire and made students think, oh, I'd never even considered that. That might be something. How would they best prepare themselves for a world you know, for the world of advertising, ending up where you are, perhaps?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, but I think that idea of rejection is probably the biggest thing to prepare yourself. Is that you're not, you know, I think the classic term is holding on to a baby. Like, you've got a little kind of, every idea is really precious, and I think sometimes you have to let them go, and then you have to, or understand why they've got to be let go, or understand that you haven't got the solution that people want to buy, or is the right solution for this brief, because there must be a reason for why that is. But rejection will be, you know, don't beat yourself up about it. Eventually you'll come up with an idea that everybody loves in the agency, and you know, the client will love as well, and you'll get it made. And I think there's no better feeling than getting it made in the end. But yeah, preparing yourself for rejection is probably the biggest thing.
Right. Okay. I'll open up now to Emily and see if there's anything in addition she wanted to ask. I have got the big question that I ask at the end of each of these interviews about the intrinsic value of art and studying art, but I'll let you process and think about that for a minute. Emily, was there anything in particular you wanted to ask?
Yeah, definitely. So advertising is quite an exciting sort of part of the sort of art world, but we can't see it, can we? Because there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and we sort of see the end product. So if I was thinking about what does the future of advertising look like, so what's interesting that as our students kind of grow up and kind of a bit more and go to university and kind of take on different courses, what do you think it's going to look like when they come out in sort of 3-4 years time that might be different from now, or your experiences in the past? And I might just mute myself while you answer, because next door are using an angle grinder, so I will kind of pop in and out. I apologize now.
It's all right. Yeah, no, I think it's the same. My knowledge of this is that trends happen. You know, advertising changes quickly with trends. You know, at the moment, everybody's trying to make TikTok videos, trying to sell stuff. Everybody thinks that's the next big thing. Everybody thinks that the second one is the big thing. Everybody thinks that, you know, Netflix is the next big thing. It constantly evolves. So you'll head into the industry and there'll always be something out there that's trending, or something out there that's changed. Or we're now obviously way more technically focused now, with being everyone on a computer. So probably digital will take another turn again. But what remains the same every single time is that a good idea is a good idea. And it's all about problem solving, is what we started off. It's that it will not change. The whole thing is about problem solving, and solving. Just the solving will move to something else. It will be that it might be that people are spending too much time on their phones, or that might be a problem that you need to solve. You know, so although the industry will change in what they output, the same thing will be asked of people that are in there. I think in terms of people, collaboration is probably changing a lot. I think collaboration is becoming a lot easier since the introduction of technology and email, and being able to miraculously send an illustration over from South America to here is really easy. So that's changed massively. Before you'd have to work with people locally. So that will change. I suppose that will take another turn again. But again, it's just the same as it always is, diverse, full of different people that you can work with, full of different characters. Anything is possible. The world is your oyster, and the industry will not change from that. And as I mentioned earlier, I think there might be a turn going on at the moment where the seriousness has finally had its knocked out of it, because the seriousness was taken over for a bit. Everybody was kind of, as they should be. Brands are obsessed by numbers and money and selling stuff, but I think they lost along the way that actually what they need to do is make their brand appeal to people by not taking the world so seriously and have a bit of fun, rather than always, thinking that they've got to hit the sales target all the time and come across a certain way. And, obviously there's a lot of shift going on diversity wise as well. That will change. But it's an incredibly diverse anyway, and always has been in my view from what I've experienced.
Brilliant, thank you. And I suppose the other question that a lot of our students ask is, how do you sustain your career and support yourself? So is this a lucrative career? When we ask this, talking about money is quite a strange thing, but obviously earning money for yourself and keeping yourself going with your career, how does that work if you're a creative within advertising?
Yeah, I think that it's a funny thing, money. I've always believed that I always believe that you get back your rewards for what you put in the industry. I think you hear a lot of things about the industry in the press, I think, as well. And I think when you're a young creative, I think you need to get money out of your mind. You need to think about, why am I here? I'm here because I want to be in this industry, and I'm here because I want to make an impact. And I'm here and I'll do whatever it takes. So when I say that, you'll end up on the sofa of someone's flat, and you're not thinking about where the rent's going to come. You need to find a way to take the money out of your mind. Obviously it becomes a thing, because obviously we've got to live, so that's still fair, and still there should be fairness in that aspect. But I've always just felt like that the industry is quite generous with recognizing when you're doing well, and recognizing when you're growing. And also recognizing when, like you said, sustaining it. Also recognizing that I think you can have a couple of, downward times where you might have 6 months to a year where you've not got anything out, or your work's took a bit of a downturn. And I think that everyone recognizes that's quite normal. Obviously you don't want to do that all the time, but again, as I said, with trust in the process, it all comes down to trusting that process. If you trust the process, it'll all come back round. You've got to be a believer. You've got to just believe that it's going to happen. And I think in terms of kind of other sustaining things, I think obviously your job changes as well as you go through. Like, I manage more people now, so the challenge for me is kind of influencing and making changes to other people, and making sure that around me they're learning their craft, or giving them, empowering them to give their ideas across. I'm not going to give you the answer. You need to show me an answer, but I can help you along the way. And I think that's another, your job role changes as you go forward, which helps with the stifling of if you're creatively tired. Or a lot of places, also going into granular detail, a lot of places offer kind of breaks, and if you've been there a long time, you can have a sabbatical and go and write a book or something, or have a bit of time out because you need it. You might be burnt out, but creative burnout is definitely real.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time so far. I'm going to read out Louis' question, which is quite specific to what you were talking about. What's your opinion on the effectiveness of companies having I think he means social media managers using platforms such as such as Twitter, to interact with fans and to, I guess, collate the opinions of fans or followers in order to form a policy, form a campaign, almost. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you mean using people direct Twitter?
Yeah.
I think there's a time and a place for it. I think that probably places lean on it. Some brands or places lean on it too much. I think it's a bit like using something out of pop culture or using a celebrity. Sometimes there's a time and a place for using a celebrity. Think of Van Damme on the top of a truck when he's doing the split. That's perfect. Perfect celebrity placement. But sometimes it's just an example of this is Mariah Carey Walker's Christmas ad. Completely ludicrous. What's she got to do with Chris? It just doesn't make sense. There's no link there. There's no problem been solved there. It's just how much money have we got? We'll throw it at Mariah Carey. It's just, and that's the same problem with the Twitter thing. It's all down to what you're trying to, what the brand's trying to achieve. And community managers, if we're talking about that, there's obviously a time and a place for brands to have or have. They'll all have strategies as to why they're on Twitter.
Right.
It all becomes from a bigger thing. If one of their strategies is to really engage with the people that use their products, like say Peloton or someone, Peloton they really want to shout about how many people use Peloton bikes. So that seems like a sound strategy to them.
Yeah.
Whereas for Walker's Crisps, is that the right strategy? So it's all down to kind of what, whereas another brand might be a problem solving brand for people. So their brand is all about helping people. So it's about listening rather than collating.
Sure.
Or using it for themselves, for their own internal listening to make their products better. Or it's all down to a specific. I think there are brands that exploit it, definitely, because advertising is exploited all the time.
So a lot of that crosses over with Emily's earlier question about what's the growth area within advertising, and what do our students need to be good at in terms of understanding the market and the industry going forward. This is the question I ask at the end of every one of these sessions, and sometimes we get really interesting responses. Honestly, reflecting on your journey through your creative career, Mark, what do you think is the intrinsic value that art played in your career, studying art at GCSE, at A level, going through that path? What do you think the intrinsic value of studying art has been for you?
Yeah, it's a mindset. It's a as I said earlier, it's about believing. I think it's about believing anything's possible. Believing that, as you said at the start of this, is that it's all around us. Everything is designed. Everything's a piece of art, if you want to look at it that way. And advertising is the same as well. But I've ended up in commercial arts, because I liked art. And I think it was a Steve Jobs quote where he said something about when you notice that you can change the world around you. You can push a wall. When you notice you can make a dent in a wall, push and pull a wall, then it changes you completely. And I think that's probably quite what art does to you. Once you've got into that mindset, of understanding that everything, as I'll go back again, I keep saying problem solving, but everybody's doing their own bit of problem solving. You might go to a modern art show and some people love it. That's right. That's what it's all about. Otherwise, what's the point in the world? Yeah. So I think that is an art in general kind of does wonders for you. And then in terms of studying it, you just get open to all sorts of characters and people and different ways of thinking, and realizing that your brain is the same as theirs, but also realizing that it's completely different. So it's kind of that's the beauty of it, is that you kind of. I don't really subscribe into that idea where it's for the kids or the people that are different. I think it's for I think it's literally for everybody. I think that's a bad expression for me, because I think it kind of pigeonholes a particular type of person who's perhaps struggling with their identity, or struggling with what they want to do, or struggling with the way they feel, or want to. Yeah, I think it just pigeonholes it into that, and it's not what it's about really. I think it's such a diverse world, the art world. And it's such a privilege to be able to make a career from something where you get to think of putting polar bears on Mars or something, you know. Where else can you do that, right? Where else can I have an idea that I can present to a client that I want to put a polar bear on the moon? You know, it's crazy when you think of it that way.
It's brilliant, is what it is, and to be able to teach it and to enable it is an even greater privilege for us. And thank you so much, Mark, because that's been the most valuable conversation we've had, I think, over the last couple of days. I mean, this is up there with ranking. Thank you so much for your time and your.
Has anybody else got any questions or anything?
Yeah,
Has anyone got any other questions?
We've got the chat open, so guys, if anybody wants to pipe up and say anything, that would be amazing.
It's all right. I think it's like you say, it also is kind of, it's quite difficult at a kind of younger age when you're I'm not very good at tests or a test situation. You know, I put me in a room and do me a test on art, I'll probably fail it. I just don't, you know, I don't struggle with that side of things. And I think that's quite a difficult thing to get your head around, because you're being told for a lot of your life that it's quite black and white. Yeah. And art's not black and white, you know. And as you probably know, it's like how do you even judge it? How do you even grade it? You know.
Okay, so now the questions come in, Mark. Right, so Georgia, you've got a mic. Do you want to explain that question?
So after hearing like what you've been saying and taking it in, I'm just wondering what your advice would specifically be for us.
So yeah, so you mean kind of where you would go? I suppose it's kind of, some of you might have an idea about what you want to do, and some of you won't. And I think if you're passionate about being in the creative industry, then you need to, you know, you need to explore that avenue. I think that you'll always come out of it with the positive outcome of either A, I've understood I don't want to be in the creative industry, or B, I do. Like, so that's valuable. But also you might discover that actually you thought you wanted to be a photographer, but you don't anymore. You want to be something else. And I think that's probably the other key side to it. I think that also, you know, we always think of a path when we think that way. I think university is one path, art school's one path. That doesn't necessarily have to be the path. You might go and get an internship at a film grading studio because you're into film, and then all of a sudden you're making tea for them, and then they're putting you on an apprenticeship. I don't know, but it's kind of fueling your own passion, I think. And also being prepared for not forks in the road, but I think you always make you feel like, you know, if you're going to go and do a maths degree, you're kind of doing a particular degree. You know what you kind of, or law degree, you know what you're kind of going to do. And I think it's hard sometimes for people to get their heads around that you're going to do this degree that you don't really know what it is you're going to do. And I think people can give you a really blank expression when you sort of say that to people. And I think it's not about kind of, it's about finding yourself as well, creatively. That's probably the better word. It's not about kind of a specific job. It's about finding what makes you tick.
That's brilliant. Hermione, do you want to speak up and say your question out loud? You feeling that?
Yeah, sure. Hiya.
Hi.
Basically, my question is kind of about, is there someone, I don't know, maybe you've worked under, worked for, worked with, that maybe did something for you or said something to you that you carry with you and that has really made a massive impact about how you do your job, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think, well, I touched on the one earlier, so we won't say that one about no one's going to die, because that's one of them. But there's a creative director who, I think he runs his own agency now, but he was at BBH, called Ian Hartfield, and he's a fabulous creative. He's probably the most creative person I've ever worked with. Unbelievably good at his job, and he was the quietest man in the room. And that is kind of, for me, when somebody's at the top of their game, he was sort of the top honcho at BBH. and he just sat in a room and was the quietest person. Took it all in, and then anything he said was super considered, super productive, and not downbeat. You know, you get this idea that you walk into a room and someone doesn't like your idea and they throw it back at you or put it in the bin, or that he wouldn't do that. He would be very considered and knew how to get the best out of anybody. And he just had the knack of no ego on the man at all. And I think that's probably the you need an internal ego. The better way of putting it. You don't need an external ego. You might have an external ego, that's fine, but you need an internal ego. That's the bigger important thing. And he had that internal ego where he knew he could problem solve this problem, and he knew that he could get the best out of the people around him. And I think it just rubbed off on me. And that in a room where people are, you know, you're in a room of 4 people and everyone's talking, I'll occasionally just step back and just be taking it all in my brain. And when you know, it seemingly looked like I'm not bothered, but that's kind of the point, really. So that's probably one thing that person that I would say had a massive impact.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Mark.